An intellectual carrot, the mind boggles.
You see? You see? You're stupid minds. Stupid! Stupid!
Earth has had Santa Claus long enough. We will bring him to Mars.
I've been afraid a lot of times in my life, but I didn't know the real meaning of fear until I had kissed Becky.
One thing will be clear. It's not for man to interfere in the ways of God.
It's alive. Oh, it's alive. It's alive. It's alive.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Earth vs. Soup, episode 109. I'm Aaron Pollier.
And I'm Darlene.
And we're doing Revenge of Frankenstein from 1958. This is a Hammer film. It's another one of our Hammer films that we have gotten a hold of. Do you have anything that you want to start with, Darlene?
90 minutes long.
Okay.
Technicolor.
Peter
released
Cushing.
in June 1958 with The Curse of the Demon on the lower double bill.
It is Peter Cushing. And as we have said before in our reviews of like the Doctor Who movies, Peter Cushing is amazing in almost everything he's in.
Like, what's his name?
Vincent Price.
Vincent Price. He has a presence that works the movie.
Yes.
Even if the movie is not that great.
And I mean, if you don't know who Peter Cushing is, he is one of the greats of the horror genre, but he was Grand Moff Tarkin in the original Star Wars movie. That's where most people know him that aren't huge fans of 1950s and 60s sci-fi and horror. And he's also Doctor Who.
You get to see him young.
He is pretty young in this. 1958. I don't even know when he was born. I can look that up really quick while we're taping here.
I think that they actually made him look older in this movie than he was.
He would have been 45 in this.
Oh, then so he's looking the age that he was.
Because he was born in 1913. So, yeah. I mean, he's been around for a while. He died in 1994. I do remember that. And I generally remember it because I was a fan of Doctor Who at that point even, and knew that Peter Cushing had played the Doctor in those movies. Anyway, have you ever seen this movie before?
No, I haven't.
And I haven't either.
I'm amazed because we watched monster movies a lot in my group that I was watching in the
Air Force.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I haven't seen it either. And there are some pretty well-known actors besides Peter Cushing in this. They've done a lot of work. The leading lady is Eunice Gayson, who the only way I knew her was that she was the girlfriend of James Bond in Dr. No and from Russia with Love. She's like one of the few girls that appears in a couple movies besides Moneypenny in the whole genre, in the whole series. I mean, there are a couple, but she actually seemingly had an actual relationship with James Bond in those first two movies. And believe it or not, she actually tried out for the part of Moneypenny. So
I think she would have done good at that.
Yeah.
But I did like Moneypenny that was there, too.
Yes. And I mean, obviously, she's the girl that's in the red dress that is in Dr. No when he's playing Baccarat. So, I mean, I recognized her. There's other people. Anyway, we should probably start in the plot. And it's actually kind of it's an interesting plot. It is an interesting plot.
Well, you start with looking at a guillotine.
Yeah.
As the credits go.
And you're like, what the hell is that? And
I was like, what is that? I'm just like, because I didn't see the blade or anything.
Yeah, it was just kind of silhouetted up against the sky. So all you see is these pillars. And to me, it just screamed guillotine just because of the dramatic way it was being filmed, even though you couldn't see anything that was really saying guillotine. Yeah, it's a guillotine, and there's like church bells tolling, and I think it said some city, and no, it didn't. It didn't say where this was.
This wasn't, but it did say 1860.
It did say 1860. Okay, so it turns out that Dr. Frankenstein is being led to the chopping block.
For his crimes.
Yeah, for his crimes that we know from the first Frankenstein movie. Okay, now we haven't reviewed the first Frankenstein movie, and I'm sure we will because it is science fiction. We're just kind of waiting for a time where we really feel like we want to do a Frankenstein, the Frankenstein review. Anyway, this is after the events of the first movie. You know those events. Dr. Frankenstein makes the creature. Creature is wanting to be human, is misunderstood. Villagers come and like wreck everything and either kill Dr. Frankenstein or capture him. So in this movie, it's like, hey, let's capture him. A fight breaks out on the block, at the block, at this execution. We don't see it. The camera pans away specifically because there's lots of people that are kind of like giving knowing looks to each other. So there's like the executioner, there's Carl.
There's the priest, because that's who you're hearing.
Yeah, the priest who's there, who's kind of giving a last...
In Latin.
Yeah. Last rites. We don't know what happens, but then we go to a bar. It like flashes
Well,
over.
they tell you it's
Karlsbrook.
Brook.
Yeah, it's all in Germany or Austria, something like that.
And a little bit later, we find it's 3 years later.
Yeah, it's been 3 years later. We go to a bar, and there's men that are drinking and planning a crime. Okay. No, this isn't 3 years later. We haven't gotten to the 3 years later yet.
Oh.
They're planning a crime. This one guy doesn't want to have anything to do with it, but is convinced to do it for a good amount of money. Like, I think he said 10 marks. And he's like, okay, well, for 10 marks, I'll go dig up a body. So they go to the graveyard, and we see the grave of Baron Frankenstein. So this is clearly right after the execution because the grave is still fresh. And these guys are grave robbers that are trying to steal bodies for science. And this was a common practice back in the day when biology, like human physiology, was really taking off. And it's because in many ways the church and very... I don't want to say closed-minded, but because they weren't. They were just unused to the idea of taking apart a dead body to understand human physiology.
Really, it started back in the 1800s.
It was early 1800s.
Where they were doing a lot of trying to get the anatomy of the human body.
Yeah. And
now,
so...
at this time in the late Victorian age... you have them stealing them for science, but it's not to know anatomy. It's more to understand what is going on. Like they'd use electric shocks of a dead body to see how the nervous system works.
That's where Mary Shelley got the idea of Frankenstein, the whole electricity bringing back.
Yes.
But in this time, it was still to understand anatomy, but it was to give to medical students as well to actually practice to practice medicine in
and you
surgeries.
had to have a fresh body.
Yeah.
For that.
So these grave robbers, this was a big business, right? So these grave robbers are digging up the grave of Baron Frankenstein. Inside is the body of the priest. Dr. Frankenstein comes out of the shadows and causes one of the graveyard robbers to have like a massive heart attack and keel over. And then we see that they cover up the fact that this grave was about to be robbed. Baron Frankenstein and his assistant, Carl. Yeah.
Yeah, Carl is the...
And that's when we go to 3 years later in Karlsbrook.
Carl is a hunchback with no ability to...
he has partial paralysis.
Yeah, he has partial paralysis, but he's also a slight hunchback.
He's not Igor.
No, he's
so to
not
speak.
Igor.
Yeah, he's... and he's not as stereotypical as you would consider Igor. Like, Igor's kind of, you can close your eyes and imagine, oh, that's Igor. But he's not. He's very intelligent. It's just that he has partial paralysis, I think, on his right side. And because of that, he has some scarring on his right side because he doesn't feel things as well. So he's hurt himself on his right side.
And his hand is like Dr. Hawking's. It's crunched up to his chest.
Well, he keeps it there because he doesn't have full function. He can move his arm. You see it. He does do things with it, but it's very difficult for him to like hold on to things. So yeah, he curls it up protectively often. Well, anyway, we then go to 3 years later and we see the Carlsbrook Medical Council. And we learn that a Dr. Stein arrived in Carlsbrook 3 years ago and is clearly the most popular physician in the city. And they're really upset about this because they say that he has like half of the clients in town going to him. And the number of doctors that are on this council, there are a number of doctors. It's a good
about
dozen.
8.
I'd say a dozen. But Carlsbrook is clearly a large city. I know that there's a Carlsbrook in real life. I'm sure there is, but I'm not really connecting it with the real life area if there is one. I'm just saying, like, with that many doctors, I would assume that this is a fairly sizable town.
Yes, it has to be.
Small city, something like that. Anyway.
But you find out in that conversation, even the president's, or I think that's the president of it.
The president of this council, yeah.
His wife is now going to see Dr. Stein.
And I looked over to you and I said, well, we know what Dr. Stein is practicing. You know, he's clearly, and we see this in a little bit because we'll go to Dr. Stein's, but they do say that they want him to join the council or they will force him to stop practicing medicine in this city. So now we go to Dr. Stein's office, and the waiting room is entirely filled with women.
Filled with pampered, wealthy women and their daughters.
Okay.
And there's one of them walks in with their daughter.
So my thought immediately, I pause the movie and I go, Darlene, what is Dr. Stein practicing? And you're like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, Darlene, number one, he's a mid-40s, intelligent, charming doctor. Obviously, the women are going to be wanting, mothers are going to want to marry their daughters to this guy because he's clearly well off. He's intelligent. He would be a good match. But the man is practicing medicine with women's problems. He's treating hysteria.
That's what you go to. And I'm just like, maybe he's just a good doctor, or
I'm sure he is a good doctor, actually, because we learn a little bit more stuff later. That he's actually using this practice to fund
a pauper's hospital.
Yeah, to fund a pauper's hospital that he is donating most of his time to. Now, there is an ulterior motive to that pauper's hospital because, of course, this is Frankenstein. But the thing is that he actually is doing good.
Yeah, but bad too. Because we see that with the...
yes.
We see that with the
pickpocket. But we'll get there. We'll get there. So Dr. Stein's waiting room is entirely filled with women. A woman brings her daughter in, Vera, who she claims is still sick even after the latest treatment. Listless, yeah. And the mother that is there is incredibly pushy and still flirty.
And I sometimes think this is the president's wife.
I don't think that.
You don't think so?
It's possible. It didn't come across in the movie, or maybe I missed it. But Vera undresses. Like, the mother forces Vera to undress, and I'm like, oh no, okay, so it's 1958. This can't be that bad. And it isn't. It's actually a very innocent type of medical exam that happens. She's in her underwear, but it's Victorian age underwear, so it's basically more clothes than women wear today out in public. I mean,
out in public, like
so
regular.
it's not a big deal. And
You get to see her ankles.
ooh. So yeah, you get to see her ankles. Big deal. For us, big deal. But yeah, she's in like 3 layers still, really. And it's funny. It's just a really funny scene. And clearly, Peter Cushing is having fun in this scene, and the women are too, because it's clearly ludicrous.
He uses a one of the old horns,
like listening horns, yeah.
Listening horns, and the girl complains about it being cold. So then he sticks his ear to her chest, and that's where that scene ends.
Yes, but it's adorable.
Yes.
It's adorable because everyone in that scene was having fun with it because, like I said, it's a ludicrous idea, even in 1958. This is really tame. I mean, it's overly tame. And it's clearly meant to be Victorian age kind of
We come to
smut.
the conclusion that well, I think he even came to that conclusion, Dr. Stein, that the woman that was trying to get him into a compromising position to have him marry her daughter.
Or to at least be attracted to the daughter enough that he might become interested.
She goes, I will leave you too. And he goes, no, you can be here.
Yeah. Because he's a very proper doctor. Okay, so obviously Dr. Stein is Frankenstein, right? We know that. We know that. But like we said earlier, he's using the funds that he gets from this medical practice to help fund a pauper's hospital to treat the poor of Carlsbrook.
And that's the next scene.
That is the next scene. And we go there and we see that he is diagnosing the sick. Okay. He's clearly up to some shady stuff, but there's he really is trying to help people.
I got to give it to Hammer about this. They made the beds really close, hard to move around in, which is what a pauper's hospital in those days, they were overpacked. So I got to give them credit for that.
Okay. I should probably just say right now, all of Hammer films are like this in that their sets are fantastic. They're all very well thought out. At least everyone that I've seen, right?
Okay.
Including this
But
pauper's
I'm giving
hospital.
this little small detail.
Yeah.
And most people would go, why is this like this? This is true to the fact of sometimes you had them in chairs.
Yes.
Or on floors when they didn't have beds. It was hard to walk around in a pauper's hospital.
Yes. And it's not clean.
No, and it's not clean there.
No, and it's not. It does not look good. Even though there's a guy that's always sweeping up, and he's
janitor.
He's a lazy SOB too. But
he's one of the problems.
Yeah, he is one of the problems because he's always drinking. He doesn't want to wash because he often claims that dirt helps keep him warm. But
and keeps him away from the disease.
Yeah, it keeps the disease off of his skin. And obviously
Stein looks at him.
Yeah, Stein gives him dirty looks all the time, but he can't convince this guy otherwise. Again, Peter Cushing in all these scenes is just
today a janitor with that idea would be fired.
Yeah.
Or not even hired.
The medical council comes to see Stein at the pauper's hospital, and he refuses to join the medical council again. And they're pretty pissed off. It's not that the whole medical council comes, it's 3 guys, right?
3 guys, and it's a wonderful playing words thing that's going on there.
I didn't even write down the dialogue. I was just really happy with it. I remember every time Peter Cushing is really interacting with a group of people, it's generally a lot of fun. He's clearly having fun. He's clearly
being the crotchety old man, though.
I think he's not being crotchety.
No, that ain't the right word. He disdains people.
People interfering. It's people interfering with him. And it's because he's obviously doing something shady. He is doing good things, but he's also doing shady things. Okay, so Stein then goes to his office, and he is starting to there was dinner that was prepared for him. And this is is this at the Paupers Hospital still? No. Yes, it is. It's at the Paupers Hospital. And he has an office. There was like a chicken dinner that was presented to him, and he's there cutting it up. And one of the guys from the medical council comes out of the shadows and says, "An excellent dissection, doctor." And Stein does not really bat an eye that there's somebody in there, because I mean he's holding like a butchery knife, really. And this is the character Dr. Hans Cleve, played by Francis Matthews. And I found that like Francis Matthews had lots of love for Doctor Who as an actor. Like he tried out for a lot of different parts, didn't really get into them for some reason, but he really tried to be a part of Doctor Who for many, many years. That's what I read. Anyway, he wants to learn from Frankenstein because he kind of knows that this guy is Frankenstein.
He makes that clear that he knows he's Baron Frankenstein. And
he said, "Hey, look, I want to learn from you. You are clearly incredibly skilled, intelligent, and you have done some amazing things. And I think the ignorant peasants of that town were wrong. That you had done something that like truly challenged science and pushed the boundaries." And Stein, he's kind of playing it up like, "Oh no, you see, I'm not that Frankenstein. Yes, of course, I am a Frankenstein, but there are many Frankensteins. You can look up in any city directory in Austria and Germany and find many Frankensteins." And it's him trying to play up this whole idea of, yeah, I changed my name because I don't want to be associated with that person, but I don't know. It's play. It's a little bit of a game that Stein is doing with.
But then this Hans
Cleve's like, no. You're
blackmails
Frankenstein.
him to
I will.
Assistant.
He does blackmail him, but it's not really a mean
blackmail. It's
do I even have it written down? Like, no, not really. It's not really a mean blackmail. He's just like, I will tell the council that your name is Frankenstein. I think that's what it was.
Yes.
And I wouldn't be lying. And I'm not going to say that you are the Frankenstein. I don't think he came out and said that, but I would say that you are one of that family. And Stein kind of goes, all right. You can see some gears click around in his head.
Then he asks about his credentials.
He's like, well, I've done this and this and this and this. So Frankenstein says, fine, I will take you on as an assistant because I do need an assistant. And you do seem to have the good qualifications. So he is brought down to Stein's laboratory, which is below the Paupers Hospital. Okay. And we see that on the exam table, there's this arm from a pickpocket that he had removed.
Yeah, that was one of the other scenes of the Paupers Hospital.
At the Paupers Hospital, right before. He's like, this arm has to come off.
It has a very distinctive tattoo.
Yeah, and he was like, no, that arm has to come off. And I think that there was something wrong with it. Because the pickpocket from earlier was complaining about things with his hand or something like that. So I don't think that Stein just amputated an arm willy-nilly.
But it gives it off that way.
It does give it off that way.
So you're not too sure whether he's taking parts as payment?
I don't think he is. I see the way that Peter Cushing at least plays this role and what we see of him getting body parts, it doesn't seem like he's actively mutilating people. I think it's him slowly but surely putting things together when somebody dies or somebody does need to have a limb amputated. Okay? because he's found like a way to preserve body parts
Yes,
really
he
well.
has.
So
And that was something that was supposed to be from the first movie.
Sort of.
That's what I got from his discussion
That
with
he had learned how to
Hans.
preserve bodies. Okay, then he shows Hans a demonstration. And I wrote down that he demonstrates a horrific experiment. To me, it's horrific because I'm not really sure why this is done. So he cranks on a generator, and it's an electrostatic generator. It's your common like mad scientist laboratory type stuff that you would see, but in the case of Hammer films, it's all actually really well done. There's some actual electrostatic generators there. There aren't like
There's
Bandograph.
capacitors that are run a red light.
Yeah, there's like a
And
red
I
light
don't
in them.
understand the red light.
They are capacitors. They're supposed to be capacitors. They look like capacitors, but there's clearly like a special effect light in them to make them look like they're lighting up for some reason. I don't know. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. So what Stein has built is an artificial neuron. It's like he says it can do one thing. He built an artificial, he calls it a brain, but it's a very, very simple brain that uses these like bubbling chemicals, and I guess it's like a chemical reaction to simulate a part of the brain, because he's hooked it up to a set of eyes
And an arm.
And he goes, now watch. The human mind is conditioned to see fire as danger. So he like lights a Bunsen burner, and he shows it, he like puts it near the eyes, and the eyes like twitch in this.
And the eyes and the arm are in this water.
Yeah, so the eyes twitch towards the fire and follow the Bunsen burner. And he goes, now it's instinctual that fire, since fire is danger, that the body will recoil from it. And he puts it near like the box that has this hand in it, and the eyes are clearly still following the Bunsen burner, and like the arm twitches. And he goes, I have figured out how the mind works and how nerves work, but my artificial brain with all these bubbling chemicals is only capable of doing this. And that's why I need to actually have the one missing ingredient in all of this is a proper, healthy brain.
And that's what he didn't have in Frankenstein.
Yeah, that he was unable to properly integrate the brain with the body. So much of the stuff that goes on in this movie deals with integrating a brain with a body. And the brain has to be healthy. Okay? That's the big takeaway from this. So then he is shown, Stein shows Hans behind this curtain that there's already a body, that he's already basically built this perfect body. He calls it, this time he's perfect, only a few scars. Like, this new body does not look like the Frankenstein that you would recognize with, Boris Karloff. It's not like there's scars all over. There aren't like these bolts.
You do see some
surgical scars, but they're very, very mild. And it's because he says, I have practiced all this stuff so many times, for the past 3 years, that I've gotten really good at putting people together without really showing scars. And it turns out that this skill has extended to him being able to surgically alter body parts to look a certain way. Okay, anyway. All he needs is a brain, and he says, Dr. Stein says, I have a volunteer, and it's his assistant, Carl. Carl that has the partial paralysis, all that. Anyway, Hans is like, wait a second, if you need a healthy brain, look at Carl. He's partially paralyzed. He's slurring his speech. And Stein goes, no, you don't understand. There's nothing wrong with Carl's brain. There is like a clot that prevented a part of like his nervous system from functioning properly. And I'm like, okay, wait a second. What you're trying to describe is that he had a stroke, and that means that there is a part of his brain that isn't healthy.
And that comes in play later.
Does it? I don't think so.
Because he starts to become.
Well, no, we'll get to that. I don't think that's the case. Remember, the reason why he starts acting the way he does is because of actual trauma to his brain that occurs right then.
Okay.
Anyway, we are introduced to a woman that comes to ask Dr. Stein to be an assistant, and that is Margaret Conrad, played by Eunice.
Assistant to in the Paupers Hospital.
And that's played by Eunice Gayson, who I've already talked about. You know, she's in 2 Bond movies, etc., etc.
She's a daughter of one of the medical council.
Yes, she's a daughter of one of the medical council, and Dr. Cleve ends up speaking to her. Carl enters and is immediately smitten by her during this interview. That night, they're going to give Carl his new body, but Hans and Dr. Stein say yes, she can work for them. She does seem to have like actual care for people, so she's able to work at this paupers hospital.
With the condition that when he comes in, she leaves.
When Carl comes in?
No, not Carl. Dr. Stein.
Okay. So that night they're going to give Carl his new body. They end up. Oh, they also talk about this monkey that they have in the laboratory. It's in a cage. It actually has. Stein says that he was able to put in the brain of an orangutan into it, and that it's perfectly healthy, but it only eats raw meat now for some reason. And I guess he doesn't really see a problem with this, even though like chimps and orangutans really don't only eat raw meat. That's kind of strange. So they transfer his brain, and the brain is an incredibly good special effect when they take out his brain, because it is a real brain. Like, it's a sheep brain, but it is a real brain that they're using. And supposedly I read that the special effects crew thought it was a fake brain and left it out overnight for filming.
Ooh.
And it was awful. It was terrible the next day, but they still had to use it.
Ooh.
So yeah, it's a real brain, guys. Like, that's.
Would a sheep brain or a pig brain be better?
I don't know. I'm not a anatomist. Anyway, the point is that I guess the British censors lost their shit about having a real brain on screen and felt that it was a movie only for sadists. And I'm like, okay, wait a second. If the animal was slaughtered for food, right? In general, you're not going to be using the brain. Why not?
Except for dyeing and
tanning.
Yeah.
But I mean, why not use a real brain if it was just going to be thrown away anyway?
Yeah.
It gives some sort of authenticity to the movie. Yeah, it's a little gruesome, being that if you know if it's that it is a real brain. But every time you see a brain in this movie, it's a real brain. They're using a real brain. So they transfer his brain, and they begin electrically stimulating this body that Stein has built. He wakes up, starts to look around, and then he like grabs these wires and electrodes that are around him and starts electrocuting himself. And they all freak out. They turn off the electricity, and then they strap him to a table so he can take time to get used to his new body. So one of the things that Stein says was a problem in his first experiments was he never gave the brain enough time to adapt to its new body. And if you don't give it enough time, it is unable to control itself properly. And there's like it starts to emotionally destabilize. So he has Carl now in his new body strapped down to this table. And we see basically a week pass by in a couple very brief scenes where they're getting Carl to move his arms slowly to work, to slowly speak, start relearning how to speak again. Anyway, the new woman, Margaret, is basically slowly during this week is slowly getting to understand that there's something strange going on below the paupers hospital. And she does know, like, the workers at this paupers hospital do know there's a laboratory underneath of it, but they think it is a standard type of laboratory for a physician to have, right? Like, he's down there looking at people's body parts that he has to, amputate for whatever reason, or if somebody died in his care and was
They
truly
probably think it's a morgue.
a morgue or like an actual laboratory. Like, hey, this guy's down here teaching people about medicine or what, or it's a chemistry laboratory as well to make medicine. Like, anyway, the workers there all sort of know there's something weird going on down there because no one's really allowed down there, even the janitors. So Margaret, this new worker, is informed about these strange going-ons by the janitor, who is the dirty, lazy guy that's always drinking. He's kind of a charmer, granted, but he's also clearly not the best worker for a hospital. That's probably all they can get to work there, though, because it's a pauper's hospital and the pay is kind of crap. He tends to scam booze off of Dr. Hans Cleve quite a bit, if you noticed.
Oh, no, I didn't notice.
Yeah, because there's medical alcohol there, but he scams it off of him because he'll come into the office and go, and then, like, Hans will roll his eyes and go and get, like, the coffee pot and pour coffee and then put like a dollop of rum in there or gin. And he's like, oh, well, I'm not asking for it, sir, but I appreciate it, kindly, and he does that kind of stuff.
He's clearly an alcoholic.
I don't know if he's an alcoholic. I don't think he is. I think he's pretty standard amounts of drinking for the time. Honestly, I do. Because he's never sloppy drunk. He's never anything like that. He's actually always very proper. So he says, hey, look, I will show you what's going on.
So he's a functioning alcoholic.
I'll show you what's going on if you go into the office and get me the master key. So Margaret does, and they go around really quick, and she finds Carl in his new body in this bedroom, and he is very happy to see her because obviously he was taken with her in his old body, and he talks to her for a little bit about, like, hey, I've met you before, but you won't remember me. He doesn't come out and say that he's Carl and that he's in a new body or whatever, but she's clearly interested in him as a person. I don't want to say that she's attracted to him, but she has a lot of care in her heart. And Carl comes off as being a very kind person as well as educated, because Carl, as Dr. Stein says, Carl, there's nothing wrong with Carl's brain. He's incredibly intelligent. He's a good person. And I'm doing this because A, it will further my science, and B, it will help Carl. Okay. And so, like, yeah, is Frankenstein a villain in this movie? Not sort of, because you might say that he might be amputating limbs that don't need to be, maybe, but he's also like this incredibly kind person that is trying to further science and medical, in the medical field.
He's sitting on a fence with being.
Yeah, he's definitely sitting on a fence, but I think he's a villain just because of the society of the time being so against doing anything with the human body, and like going against God's work or creating life in a lab, that kind of thing. Anyway, we see Otto the monkey eating meat, and now Hans Cleve, Dr. Cleve, he says that's really weird because they shouldn't be eating meat. I mean, they shouldn't only be eating meat. They should like to have some vegetables and stuff like that, but they won't eat it. Like, this chimp won't eat anything except
And chimps
raw
and
meat. Orangutans
eat fruit.
Yeah, I mean, chimps will eat meat if need be, but it's like they're not only carnivores, right? So Carl knows all about this problem, and Stein says it's a problem with the integration, that you need to give the brain time to integrate. And as long as there's no damage to the brain, as long as blood flow is kept going, the brain will reintegrate with the body over time. And Carl knows all about it and says he is not going to risk doing anything too quickly. He knows the consequences of this. Carl gets dressed, practices walking, and then he does escape out the window. He wants to go and see Margaret. Okay? But first, he needs to deal with the one thing that's been weighing on his mind, and that's his old body.
That's because Hans Cleve talked to him at the first thing and saying that he would be... he doesn't like crowds of people gawking at him because of how bad his body has been.
Yeah.
They gawk and treat him as... and Hans said that he would be viewed as
a medical
miracle. And with him showing his new body and the old body, it would...
well, I mean, he was going to go around to like medical schools and be shown. And I get it. I mean, Stein wants to progress the medical field, and this is one way of doing it, but he also has to understand that, Carl would be very, very uncomfortable with it. And Carl is a person, he should have a say in this, and especially since that's like his old body.
And they've preserved it like they preserved the perfect body.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with his old body. So he climbs out the window, he goes into the lab, and he's knocking things around because he's still not perfectly used to his new body. And one of the workers, one of the big guy workers from upstairs, kind of hears all this banging around downstairs, and he thinks somebody's broken in. So he's going down to there to look. Carl's able to throw his old body into the furnace, but at this point, the big guy from upstairs is there. He sees Carl and immediately thinks he's broken in to trash the place or like steal something. And this worker is very loyal to Dr. Stein and does not want anything to happen. So he wails off and slugs Carl in the face. And this is where I go, Darlene, this is where the problem is. Because in this fight scene, Carl gets the hell beaten out of him.
But Carl ends up killing the guy.
And it's because where was he hit every single time with heavy blunt objects? In his head. The brain took damage. He hadn't fully integrated. He hadn't fully healed yet. He had gotten out of bed before he really should have. Even though he was being careful not to do anything too strenuous, the fact is that this big brute came downstairs and beat the hell out of him, about his head. So Carl, at the end of this, he looks up and like the right side of his face where he used to be paralyzed is like an erectus, and his arm is clenched, and it's like he's going back into this habits of his old body, and then he kills this guy. So anyway, where are we at this point?
We're at the two doctors find Carl not in his bed.
Yeah, okay. So the Margaret is at the stables writing, and she finds Carl hiding there. And Carl's clearly in distress. He's gotten control of his body back a bit. He's not looking like he's completely paralyzed on his right side again. But he's clearly like sweaty, and there's something wrong. And this is the makeup. I think they really do a good job with his makeup, slowly making him look less and less perfect, so to speak, because his body isn't integrating with the brain and body isn't integrating because of all this damage now. He reminds her that she offered to help him. She wants to help and goes to talk to Dr. Stein. But he's like, no, I don't want him involved. And again, like Carl starts having partial paralysis. And he runs from the stable, and this is where he encounters like a young girl stalking off from her boyfriend. and she was wanting to have some hanky-panky with him. Remember this scene? And he was actually trying to be a proper gentleman. He was like, no, I'm not really comfortable with this. Maybe we should call this a night. And she stalks off, like really ticked off that she didn't get any hanky-panky. That's really what the scene was. Like, she was trying to get...
I didn't get that, but that's okay. Sometimes I don't always understand all the scenes as they're...
Yeah, she was like, wouldn't you like to kiss me? He's like, that I don't know about that. We shouldn't do that. Like, because they were out unsupervised. 1860, like, this guy is really trying to be a proper guy, and this girl is being really forward. Well, she stalks off, and at this point, Carl's having another fit. Like, he sees her, she screams, and he reacts and murders her. Well, is it a murder? Because he's not really in control. She's killed by him, but he's not really in control.
It's still
is
killing
it
somebody.
I mean, is it his fault though? Is it murder because it's his fault, or is it an accident? I don't know. That's something that, again,
up to courts.
A good science fiction movie at least lets you open up those questions and think about that, right? Like that's one of my things that I always say. Good science fiction does this. He murders this girl or kills her, whatever. Carl knows he's not doing well, but can't help but to like gaze distantly at Margaret. Like, he's kind of following her around. And we end up being at a high-end party where Margaret is later on after this, like, horse riding and meeting Carl. Dr. Stein and Dr. Cleve come to talk to Margaret because they know that she has been around now inside the laboratory, that she was clearly close to Carl, and that some of the other workers have said that she's seen Carl even in this new body. So they want to come and talk to her. She says that Carl was really distressed, and she doesn't really know where he is. Now, this is like a high society ball.
Yeah, and she does say that she found him in the stables.
And at this point, since we know that Carl's still following Margaret around and watching her, because he wants help, but he doesn't want help from Stein because he feels like he's going to be put on display. He freaks out and breaks through this door and confronts Dr. Stein. He begs for help. In front of everybody. Everybody at this party calling him Frankenstein. And at this point, Carl looks terrible. Like, half of his face is slumping. He's slurring his words. He looks like he's falling apart. Again, it's because of all this damage. He begs for help, and the medical council now knows who he is because there were members of the medical council at this high society ball. Now, this is where he starts trying to play damage control because he gets Carl back, but he's playing damage control with the medical council saying, oh yes, I am Frankenstein, but I changed my name because I don't want to be associated with...
The same spiel he gave to Hans Cleve.
And most of the medical council actually believes it because it is a fairly convincing argument that he's making. Like, I don't want to be associated with that person. Yes, especially since I am a medical doctor. I did grow up near the area, and yes, we're like cousins, but I am not him. So yes, this is why I changed my name. And it's because he had to go talk to them because remember, all of his clients just disappeared because suddenly he is that Frankenstein, and this monster broke through the freaking door into this high society ball, and all of his clientele were high society women and their daughters.
I could also say that the council probably exaggerated it so they could destroy him.
Destroy his reputation. So yeah, they sort of believe him and let him go, but they go to the Baron Frankenstein's grave that was there when he was executed, right? They dig it up and they find that there's this priest's outfit in there, and it's the priest that was there at his execution that was actually killed and that was actually put into the grave. They know that Baron Frankenstein is still alive, and they're like, okay, all the circumstantial evidence now points to Stein being Frankenstein. They then everybody goes to the Paupers Hospital, and the patients end up attacking Stein because now everyone there thinks he's Frankenstein. They want nothing to do with him, and they think all he's been doing is medical experiments on them, where again you can argue that perhaps the amputations might not have all 100% been legit, which is possible.
Like the one that's the pickpocket thief.
It's possible, but it's not. It's also not. It's also possible that they were all legitimate.
You never know.
And clearly, he was helping the paupers there with their honest illnesses.
Anyway, going to the next part of the scene,
they attack him and all but kill him. Cleve takes him into the lab, where Stein tells him he knows what to do. Cleve removes Stein's brain from his body and puts it into a new body that Stein had actually already been crafting. And it turns out that this new body looks very similar to his old body. Not exact. So they got Peter Cushing to play the part again, but obviously they put a little bit of like differences in his, like they might have put a little bit of cotton in his cheek or something like that. And it's the body that had the tattoo in the arm, because he actually used that for this new body. And he sets up another medical.
Hans does somewhere else.
Yes, and now it's
place.
like Dr. Franks or something like that. That this new medical practice is at. And he is again serving high society women, and he's like, okay, so who's next? And the end.
Yes.
So and the thing is, with that ending, it's implied that Stein truly did integrate with this new body properly, that he has full control over it, that there is no issues, because even Hans Cleve he doesn't blink. Everything is okay. We're actually not only pushing the boundaries of medical science ethically at this point, at least to him, because Cleve never came across as somebody that ethics wasn't something he was interested in. He was always concerned with the ethics of it. He actually did want to help people. And to me, Frankenstein actually wanted to help people as well. It's just that there's a couple little shady things in this.
And there's ethic issues.
There's ethics issues in this. Well, anyway, so we've talked about the plot. My notes on the plot were actually only like a page and a half, even though we just spoke about it for 50 minutes. It's because there's lots of little things in this. And one of the things that I feel works, let's just start with what works. In Hammer films, the writing is really good. There's lots of little tiny parts that go into each scene that build up into new plot lines that kind of parallel the main plot. Now, those side plots aren't big, but they're always there. They tend to build in, oh, here's this woman that's now helping. We understand that she's a part of high society, that Stein has always been dealing with high society women. She's interested in helping him because of...
But you also have the thought of her being a spy to...
the medical council. There's lots of little things that happen in this that build into side plots that reconnect with the main plot later on. There's lots of little details in dialogue that get dropped in. And I'm sure not every Hammer film is like that, but at least the writing in this film, fantastic.
The really settings good. Are great.
Yeah, the sets.
The sets.
All the props, great.
They come in and make you like I said about the paupers thing being, the beds
dirty.
Were tight
together. There's an attention to detail in Hammer films that I appreciate. And, looking back to that one sci-fi movie where the kids are in the bunker, which that's a Hammer film, it's a completely different style of film from this. Yeah, The Damned. But the attention to detail in the sets there as well is top notch. And you realize, I think it's Hammer Productions overall had some very good prop masters, some very good set designers that really, really cared.
Really cared and really thought out some things.
And one of the other things I'll say that works in this is costuming. A lot of times in these movies that are period pieces that aren't Hammer, we're often taken out by saying that doesn't look like it should be there. This is a piece of costuming that seems to not fit, or it doesn't fit the character, something like that. That it doesn't fit the character's personality. But here, the costuming never took me out of the movie. It never made me question that. All the costuming choices, including the freaking Victorian bloomers, fantastic, really well done. There's nothing that I could find fault in it with. What else, you'd go with some of the things that you think work?
Well, I've already said about the settings was
the sets. Yeah,
the sets were put together and thought out. Not just does it work, but does it work in history of where we're going?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
The costumes are the same way. Does it work with the person? Does it work with the setting? Where it's supposed to be taking place? Does it fit the personality of the person? Does it say something about the person?
Yeah.
I think that's something to look at these films if you're a student of media and understand where it's going with it.
Is there anything else you think works really well?
The plot actually works. It's not a dumb thing.
No, it works really well. It's a good extension of the story. It's a very good extension of the story.
And it doesn't conflict the other one.
Not really. No, I'm sure there is if we went back and really studied it. Like there could be some continuity issues. But none that really stood out to me. None that stood out. I think the plot works. It's a good extension of the story showing Frankenstein attempting to continue his research in the same direction, but also in a much more intelligent, less mad sciencey way.
Well, we'll see when we actually watch Frankenstein. But like we had of the Amazing Colossal Man and the War of the Colossal Beast, we had details that were just like garbage
between
that
each other.
didn't add up.
Can I go with one other thing that works in this on top of all the stuff, all the actors in this, large and small, I thought did a fantastic job. Even the background actors, like Pauper B with tuberculosis, great job. Oh, he has a raspy voice, he stays in character. Great, awesome. That it worked. Random janitor guy that's scamming alcohol off hands, great acting. Carl, great acting. Dr. Hans, great acting. Peter Cushing, of course, great acting. Margaret, played by Eunice Gayson, great acting.
The mother and daughter,
great acting. They were clearly having fun. I mean, if maybe those two, you could say, I don't know, just because of the fact you could tell that the actors were having a lot of fun in that scene. Maybe you could, but even then, hey, if the actors are having fun and you're having fun, it's succeeding at doing something. It's succeeding at the scene. The scene is a success. So even the background characters, I think, did at the very least a good job. Maybe not great, but a good job. Like the inspectors, can you say anything like, did the inspectors stand out? Not really, but they did a fine job. Fine job. Is there anything that doesn't work in this movie that you can think of offhand?
Not offhand. I kind of got a little bit bored, but I think it was my mood that I was in.
Bored? Geez.
Well,
I mean, I don't think there's
like I said, there isn't any reason for me to be bored, but except for myself.
Because I don't think there's any wasted scenes in this.
No, I don't think there is. It's not that. It was again me.
A rare movie that we watch that doesn't have wasted scenes. Because a lot of times there are movies, even good movies, have wasted scenes. But I don't think there is one in this. Not really. I don't know if I can say anything didn't work. Like the music, it's fine. Maybe it doesn't rise to the whole like it works, but it's fine. The editing, it's fine. I like the camera work. It's fine. At the very least, fine. I like some of the kind of artsy shots that they do in it. Is this one of those movies that we might actually not really find something that doesn't work?
I don't think there isn't something that doesn't work.
Yeah, that's shocking.
But if you're wanting to watch something that is, and this is a sequel too,
I mean, technically it's a sequel,
so that's impressive by itself, because usually sequels.
but Peter Cushing, like Vincent Price, he brings his A game all the time.
But you can have an A game and a bad plot, and it doesn't.
Yeah, because I mean, even Peter Cushing, like let's say Dalek Invasion of Earth 2150 or whatever, the movie, the second Dalek movie. Peter Cushing has brought his A game, but the plot is pretty ridiculous in it. I'm pretty sure we even talked about how the plot was ridiculous in it. It was really boiled down from the TV episode, but he brings his A game, and every scene that he's in is great just because you buy what he's trying to sell. And I guess Peter Cushing, like we talked about in the Doctor Who movies, he's a good person in real life, and he was always kind to his actors and actresses around him. Like he refused to come back for that second Doctor Who movie unless the granddaughter Susan, the same actress, got rehired because they weren't going to bring her in. And he's like, no, I'm not going to do it unless you bring her back in because she was so good in the first one and everyone loved her and she loved doing it. So you bring her back in or I don't come. And they ended up doing that. That's the only reason the actress that played Susan is in the second movie. It's because Peter Cushing stood up for her. Like, I don't know. Peter Cushing, great guy. So is there anything else that we can say what a modern filmmaker can take away from this movie besides attention to detail and sets is a big deal?
Attention to personality with costume.
Costume, sets. Hammer brings it. Hammer always brings it. And the brain stuff isn't shocking. Like, I don't understand. It's 1958 England. Fine.
It's got to be somebody on the board, just like we have problems with courts.
Well, I think one of the newspaper reviewers said this was a movie only for sadists. Like, what? Seriously?
Well,
I've watched far more sadistic films made before this. This is tame. You see a brain in a jar, for God's sakes. And only for a few seconds. Yeah, it's a real brain, but it's an animal brain. It's not like somebody actually had their brains taken out. I don't get that. I really don't get that. Anyway, this is a fantastic film. I recommend it.
Hell, I wonder what they do about that one where you cut there was a science fiction movie in like the 90s or 2000s that they actually had the brain where they were trying to control something from it.
I don't remember, Darlene. Do you recommend this movie?
Yes, I do.
Of course. Come on. This is an amazing movie. I wouldn't go so far as to say this is one of my favorites that we've done. I mean, maybe in the top 10 for sure, I would say. Because this was a very well done movie. Top 10, but not in my top 5, I would say. So yeah, watch this movie if you can find it, folks. It's a good one. I mean, if you don't like Frankenstein movies, yeah, of course, don't watch it. But if you're into science fiction horror at all, this is like dead center of our core time period that we're trying to do.
And I'd say that it was a good British horror film.
Yeah, absolutely. Well paced, well done. It's only like 90 something minutes long. You said
it's 90 minutes.
90 minutes. So it's not that long. It's longer than a lot of the films that we've watched. But anyway, we'll stop there, folks. So this was 109. 110, we are doing Dracula. So, and that's the original Dracula with Bela Lugosi, mainly because Dracula is very iconic. It is influential on a lot of filmmaking that comes after it for both horror and science fiction. So we felt that we need to do some of those classic Universal movies to dip our toes into them and then try to explain why we see these as important to later science fiction.
And in the future, we need to do one that's
Boris Karloff.
Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi, and see if they're.
We need to find Black Cat, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. We need to find Black Cat, but we are going to do Frankenstein. We are going to do Frankenstein at some point, but the next one, 110, will be Dracula, and then 111 is going to be Attack of the Puppet People from 1958. So there you go, folks. You have 2 movies ahead of what we're going to be doing. So. Plan accordingly. Go ahead and go and watch them. So I'm Aaron.
And I'm Darlene. Good night.
And keep watching the skies.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Thanks for listening to this episode of This Week in Geek. Hungry for more? Check out our website at thisweekingeek.net. You can subscribe to the podcast, browse our Twitter and Instagram, and leave your thoughts on today's topics. If you'd like to give us some feedback, send us an email at feedback@thisweekingeek.net. Tune in next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.